Episode 113 of the Habs Culture podcast. My name is Justin Schwartz alongside Liam Baum. The Canadiens have now lost 3 of their last 4 games. 2 of those games coming against Western Conference teams. 2 of those games coming right here in the Atlantic Division to both the Boston Bruins and the Detroit Red Wings. Liam, to say the least, it's been a bit of a roller coaster of emotions for Canadiens fans, but also for the organization, seeing as their playoff spot that maybe 10 games ago felt a lot more secure is no longer. And I feel like the more that this drags on and the more that the Canadiens allow themselves to be outplayed on a nightly basis by teams in the Atlantic Division, the less good it's going to be. And here we are where the Canadiens sit with 84 points in the standings, but there's teams that are right on their coattails that are challenging for that last spot. They sit third in the Atlantic, whereas the Bruins in Detroit, who hold the first and second wildcard spots, also have 84 points each. So this is going to come right down to it. The Canadiens have played 68 games, whereas the Bruins in Detroit have played 69 games. So we're really getting to the end here. On a scale of 1 to 10, Liam, what is your confidence level that the Canadiens end up being a playoff team in the 2025-26 season?
I think I'm still very confident. I mean, let's pull this up right now. Let's get right into it. It's getting close. Like the panic meter is going off a little bit. As you can see, the Canadiens are sitting still in the third divisional spot, but that wild card position, Bruins, Red Wings, both tied in points with the Canadiens, followed by the Islanders, and don't count out the Senators because they're right there too on a 7-2-1 last 10 game streak. So for the first time in a little while, I want to say since like maybe November, the pressure is on, and I think we're both feeling it. So I'd say on a confidence meter of making the playoffs, I'm still at a good 9, but I think the pressure's on right now.
And in the last 10 games, the Canadiens are 5-4-1. You could see that on the screen. They lost their last game in regulation. For you, I guess in the short term, if we're looking back on the short term here, what's the biggest concern for you right now? Is it the power play? Is it the penalty kill? Is it 5-on-5? Is it a specific player? Is it the coaching? I don't know, but is there something that stands out to you?
I mean, I think the same problems are still here. I mean, it's very inconsistent in net. Kapanen hasn't been as good as he used to be as of late, and I think that was expected as he's a rookie. This is the most games he's ever played in a season in his career. So all the same problems are still persisting, but I think the one thing that concerns me the most is facing Atlantic teams. When you're playing in an Atlantic team, you need to win. And I said this at the start of the season. When the Canadiens go into a game, there's no game that I don't expect them to be close in. Like they should be able to win every game. Obviously, that's not realistic. But when you're going into a game against any Atlantic team, you need to pick up that 1 point at least. So, I mean, looking back at their last few games, yes, they dropped 2 to Western teams. I'm okay with. But, you know, they're winning the games against Toronto. They're winning the games against Ottawa. They win against Boston and OT, but losing that one to Detroit absolutely kills the momentum, and it also makes a massive difference in the standings, especially because they're right there with the Habs. I mean, let's take a quick look at Money Puck even. Just wanted to pull this up quick. Before that loss to Detroit, the Habs had an 85% chance of making the playoffs. Now it's down to 75.8. So everything's going to change quickly, but even now you can see Columbus has a higher chance of making the playoffs. Everything changes really quickly.
I want to point something out, Liam, here, because I think it's really interesting to not only look at the chances of the Habs making the playoffs, but to understand that if we are expecting them to make the playoffs, where your confidence level's at a 9, I would say mine's probably still floating around an 8, right? I think there's still a lot of confidence that they do. But I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but let's talk about the potential playoff matchups, because I think, like I said, we're relatively confident that they make the playoffs, but it's a question of who that they'd want to play. And the truth of the matter is that I really think it's going to come down to one of the last games of the season to really determine who their playoff matchup is going to be. But it scares me to know that at this point in time, sitting third in the division, their matchup is the Tampa Bay Lightning. Whereas if they were to get bumped down a little bit, they probably end up playing the Sabres. So how do you feel about that? Because I personally, if I was, being a Montreal Canadiens fan and just seeing based off the way that the teams have played, I think that the Buffalo Sabres are a weaker matchup than the Tampa Bay Lightning. I think Tampa obviously has the experience. They know how to win. They know they've been there many times before. There's no doubt about that. Where the Sabres are excelling right now and flourishing at a really, really opportune time. But who knows if that luck or if that success runs out a little bit once they get to the playoffs, considering that team doesn't really have any playoff experience. So not only are we concerned about the Canadiens potentially missing the playoffs, but we're also concerned about the potential matchup and how finishing higher might actually negatively affect their playoff matchup.
Yeah, I think in any world, you'd rather play the Buffalo Sabres, even if they've won 36 games of their last 42, over the Tampa Bay Lightning. I don't want to face a team that has Vasilevsky, that has Kucherov, that has Hedman, that's fully healthy come playoff time. I don't want to play a team that has Point and Gensel who can heat up out of nowhere. I'd definitely rather play the team that hasn't made the playoffs in the last 15 years and has a very similar goalie situation as the Canadiens, where they kind of have three guys in there. And, it's all about consistency. So I definitely rather play the Sabres roster. I mean, they do have the scary players like Dahlin, like Tage Thompson, but to me, it doesn't even compare to the elite players that Tampa Bay has. And even if the Canadiens do slip down to that wild card spot, I think I'd rather play Carolina over Tampa as well. So it's going to come down to the end of the season, but I'd rather any matchup other than the Tampa Bay Lightning. What do you think?
No, I agree. And I think something important to note about that is that realistically speaking, one of the only ways that you're actually going to be able to beat Tampa is if you continuously beat them up. If you continuously get bodies on them in all zones, in the D zone, in the neutral zone more specifically. And I think the issue with that is that they know how to exploit that better than anyone. And the Canadiens don't have I won't say the manpower, but don't have the strength, in my opinion, to be able to do that. I still think that one of the biggest concerns going into the deadline was the fact, and again, it wasn't something that they were going to be able to address directly right away, but it was that I don't feel like are tough enough. I really just don't. I think that they have some sort of size, but toughness, I think they lack in that department. And I think that that's something that showed a little bit more against the Capitals last postseason. And I don't doubt that it's going to be some sort of issue if the Canadiens end up making the postseason this year. And I feel like that's exactly why a matchup against the Sabres is that much more favorable, because I feel like on paper, they don't have the toughness / physicality that Tampa does either.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think Buffalo made some good ads at the deadline compared to what Tampa did, which was very minimal. But at the end of the day, again, like I said, I'd rather play a team that has little to no playoff experience over a team that's been in the finals 3 times in the last, whatever it was, 5 years. So again, like I said, it's going to come down to the wire and we're going to see how it plays out. But I think the one concern is getting the Canadiens in the playoffs first. So let's just take a quick glance around the league as well. Why not? Like we mentioned, Boston, Detroit, New York, and Ottawa still all in the race. And then going into the West, this Pacific Division, it's crazy how weak it is. There's 10 teams in the Eastern Conference that have more points than the number 1 Pacific Division team. If that doesn't create an argument about going back to 1 to 8 playoff positions, then I don't know what else they need to prove, because this is like outrageous.
Yeah, no, it's and I find it such an interesting scenario for the league as a whole, because if you zoom out and you look back to the trade deadline and you ask yourself, I think there were a lot of people that were expecting a lot more to go down at the trade deadline, many more moves, a lot more excitement in a very, very competitive league this year. But the truth of the matter is, Liam, is that if you actually look at it on paper, if you look at the teams that are competitive versus the ones that are not, there's been a dramatic shift. And I don't think it's a sustainable shift, in the sense that the Toronto Maple Leafs and the New Jersey Devils, for example, were not expected to be bottom teams in the East. Whereas I don't think you could have expected the Ducks to be top of the Pacific this year. And I think that just goes to show that teams are a little bit more hesitant to make these big splash moves, knowing that they're not, for example, Anaheim, they go out and get John Carlson. But I feel like if any other year you're at the top of the division in this league, you're going to go out and make an even bigger splash or toughen up your bottom six or add a key defenseman as a guy that you can swap in and out. But that just didn't happen that much this year. And I feel like that speaks heavily to the weird place that the league is in, where some teams that expected to be in the playoffs going in are not, and vice versa.
And you know what? I think that's kind of odd because I feel like this season the NHL is so tight that it's kind of anyone's year to win. I mean, there's obviously the Colorado and Dallas and Minnesota, but one of those teams are already out in the first round. So it becomes more narrow and narrow, obviously, as you move on in the playoffs. But I would think like a team like Edmonton, you're obviously in the playoffs, the finals, the last 2 seasons. Why don't you go out and make that big ad? I know we didn't really get a chance to talk about the trade deadline moves, and there were some significant ones, but now with Draisaitl out, Edmonton is kind of hanging on by a thread. They should make the playoffs, no problem. But if they slip into a wild card spot and end up having to play a team like Colorado, they're toast. They're toast. So I think with the NHL being so close this season, the top teams should have gone out and made that big ad. I mean, the Ducks go out, add John Carlson, which was a surprising move. But then there's like a team like Utah who realizes that it's tighter than ever and that they have a chance to do something. They go out, add Uyghur. Like these are big, big moves. And I think that's one thing that the Canadiens missed out on, because I think if they made that one ad, that top line, that top 6 guy, then that puts them over the hump. And maybe that's going to be the difference between them making the playoffs and not making the playoffs.
And if we go back to the trade deadline for a second, I think I said it on the episode before the last episode that we recorded, and I maintain my stance. I still think it would have been worth it to give up a hefty sum to acquire Robert Thomas. I maintain that because, again, you're looking at a bona fide 1C on most teams, but definitely a 2C on the Canadiens, and someone who can bring that offense and bring that point production inside a top 6. Now, I'm not saying that the Canadiens necessarily lack the goal scoring. That's been the least of their issues. But like you mentioned, it is a year to take advantage of a very competitive year, but where there's not, like, look, we can argue that Colorado and Dallas are probably the best 2 teams in the league right now. We can agree on that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a couple teams that maybe stand out, but I think Colorado can be beaten on any night. I mean, you go back to the first half of the season, they were very hard to beat, but more now teams have been able to expose that. Dallas has been heating up, especially without Rantanen, which is really interesting, but they're getting the most out of their players. But the point is that I just feel like there definitely is that competitiveness in the league this year. There's a product. And I also think that if you're a team that's kind of on the brink, but you're in that playoff spot and maybe you weren't expecting to be, but you still happen to be, I still think it's worth it. Now, don't sell every single asset you have just to make a playoff push this season, but there were moves that could have been made to bolster a roster, especially for the Canadiens, that they just didn't make, and I'm a bit disappointed that they didn't even make a minimal move.
Yeah, and we'll see if that's going to be the difference maker. And now with the pressure on, and they don't make the playoffs, what's going to be the topic in the offseason? What's going to be the thoughts on Ken Hughes, because he didn't go out and make that move? And I understand that they added a guy like Texier and they added some offseason players, but it obviously wasn't enough compared to the top teams. I talked about this as well in one of the last episodes, that what scared me the most is if the Atlantic teams went out and made significant adds. And we saw that with Buffalo. We saw that with Detroit. These teams obviously are pushing to make a playoff spot because they haven't been in the playoffs for so long. But how would that affect Montreal? And right now we're kind of seeing it. They drop a game to Detroit. So these are all important games come down the stretch.
And I also find it really funny, Liam, that before last game against the Detroit Red Wings, the Canadiens had not lost a game in regulation this season when their goalie produced above a 900 save percentage. And funny enough, last game against Detroit, the Canadiens lose by a score of 3-1 with an empty net. Dobish posts a 926. Before that, they won in overtime against the Bruins at home with a he posted a 929. Yeah, a 929 save percentage. Now, my question is to you, because I think this kind of, transfers us over to the next topic a little bit. Obviously, the Canadiens' goaltending situation this season has probably been at the forefront of their quote-unquote issues, obviously amongst others, but it's clear that the Canadiens this year are scoring goals, and they just kind of need to get subpar goaltending to win games. And the funniest part is that I saw a tweet, and I find it so true, is that the new 900 save percentage is an 890. That's just what it's gotten to. And it's funny because the league there's just so many goals being scored. But the Canadiens obviously call up Fowler in that back-to-back situation to play against the Sens. They take that game. He plays incredible. Then he follows up that game with the game against the Ducks, where his save percentage is not where it needs to be. They lose that game by a score of 4-3. I guess my question to you, or not question to you, but I just want to hear your thoughts on what you're expecting out of this goalie tandem right now. Is Monty even in play to play a game the rest of the season? Is Fowler the guy? Are you putting your full trust in him and potential trust in him to even play in a potential playoff game? Because right now, and I think it's a really interesting point, most teams, whether you're the Red Wings, whether you're the Bruins, they're riding their goalie right now. They're going with their guy. The Red Wings are going with Gibson. The Bruins are going with Swayman. And last year, up until the injury, the Canadiens were running with Montembeault. Now you're in this dilemma with just over 12 games left where you really still have that uncertainty at the goalie position. So What are you doing if you're the Montreal Canadiens management with your goalie situation down the stretch?
In all honesty, it's a terrible position to be in. When you don't have goaltending figured out come playoff time, and you're struggling to figure out who's in net, I find it could get in the goalie's head. Like, if you don't know you're going game one for playoffs, are you mentally prepared? So, I mean, right now, I feel like you just got to ride the hot hand, and Dobish has had great games. He's had poor games, but right now, I think he's the guy going forward. But come playoff game one, I mean, I think it's going to depend on the last 14 games of the season here, 13 games. I think I'm going Fowler. When Fowler's in the net, I don't know about you, but I feel the most confident in our goaltending. He's not swimming around the crease. I find that's Dobesh's style, and maybe it works. But I feel like you want a guy who's going to be calm, who shows that he's calm in the net, and makes the big saves when it matters. I think that game against Ottawa proved it itself. And again, he's only 21 years old. So seeing his calmness in the net, I think it speaks a lot about what his potential is and the goalie he's going to be. I think him starting the playoffs would be a massive confidence booster and really showing that the Canadiens believe in him. So give me Fowler to start game one if we get there.
Well, the Canadiens have a game tonight against the Islanders at home on this Saturday night. They have already confirmed that Fowler will be in the net. So despite a very good showing from Dobish, they pivot to Fowler. Now, in a conversation I had yesterday, that wasn't even a thought for me, if I'm being completely honest. I thought, you go with Dobish again, because you need to find that consistency that the Canadiens have lacked in the goaltending department this season. And this dates back to game one. And I think that this is where sometimes, Liam, I have a bit of a hard time understanding Martin St. Louis' decision-making. And it's not to be hypercritical. It's just to point out that we can both agree that they did make a bit of a mistake when it came to Dobish was playing well at the beginning of the season, but they still wanted him to get games. They wanted Montembeault to come back in. What happened? It ruined that consistent goaltending or that consistent winning that Dobish had, which then sent us, I would say, almost led us to relapsing in the goalie department. Now here we are, and I think that Dobish personally proved that he should start tonight at home against the Islanders, because he has put up 2 games where he's had over a 920 save percentage, but they pivot to Fowler. And I don't think it's a rest thing. I can't really wrap my head around that decision personally.
I think we're also forgetting the fact that Dobish is really only in his first complete season, right? So you got to give these young goalies a break. But yeah, I agree in the sense that You got to ride the hot hand. His last 2 games have been great. Um, but the fact is they're both still super young. They're not fully acclimated. I mean, maybe Dobesh is more acclimated to the NHL game than Fowler is right now, but I think it's all like an adjustment process. And especially with goalies, you're not going to get the peak of a goalie at 22, 23, 24 years old. That comes a little bit later on, unless you're like a Matt Murray early on the Penguins, or a once in a blue moon Andrew Hammond, or Binnington in his first year he wins the cup. So I think it's an adjustment process. It's the feeling out process of what the team, or who the team trusts the most in net. But like I said, I think I still trust Fowler more just based off his demeanor in the net.
I find it so funny also because there's a lot going on right now in terms of I don't know if you see it when they like during the game, they'll post it up saying Dobish in his rookie season right now is 22 wins. He has the potential to eclipse Price's rookie wins, which is 23, and then even move above that. But I find it so funny because looking at the stats, if you look at Price's rookie season, he had a 905 save percentage with a 283 GAA, whereas Dobish right now has a 274 GAA, but with has a 291 GAA, but with an 893 save percentage. I just find it funny that like, we keep talking about the wins, and I don't want to say that Dobish hasn't stolen a game here and there. Like he really stole that game against the Kings back about a week and a bit ago. But I feel like it's funny because I don't know why we keep putting so much emphasis on his wins when I just feel like a lot of the time he's just getting the goal support to get there, and it's not really because of him. And I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but that's just the truth, I feel.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think let's take a look at some of the player stats here. Pull this up really quick. I want to take a look at the goalie stats. So let's take a quick look at the goalie stats here. Obviously, the win difference between Dobesh and Montembeault is very significant. The record is obviously much better. But taking a look at the actual stats, I mean, Dobesh doesn't have that 900 save percentage. His goals against is still relatively high. And the amount of goals he's given up compared to Monty, yes, it's 15 more in 9 games, which is pretty solid. It's just not that big of a difference, and I think that speaks a lot about the goal scoring ability when Dobesh is in net versus Montembeault. Like it's kind of a luck thing, right?
100%. I honestly truly felt that a little bit more, especially in January, early January, when and it rings a bell when the Canadiens played on home ice against Vancouver, and I think they put up 8 goals, 7 goals. It was a big showing, and I remember Montembeault was sitting there with 3 goals against on 15 shots, and I said to myself, well, again, this is another time where the goal scoring that they're putting up for Dobesh is playing in his favor. And I think it's also really important to note that this decision to go back to Fowler or to go to Fowler tonight, Saturday night against the Islanders, is even that much more interesting because we saw when they went from Dobesh, who was playing pretty well, to Monty, and how Dobesh being an emotional athlete and how that affected his game going forward. And it scares me that it could potentially have that same exact effect on him down the stretch, which is the last thing we need. But you're right. I mean, look at the numbers, look at the goal scoring. Like it is a drastic difference. And yeah, it's interesting to keep in mind.
One thing that's really crazy to me that I just realized now is Dobesh and Monty don't have a shutout all season, and Fowler has the one.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts, honestly.
It's brutal. It's brutal for the Canadiens. I think Montembeault had like 4 or 5 shutouts last year. So again, it makes a huge difference when you're just not getting those saves. And like you said, when the Canadiens get an above 900, which is average goaltending at best, they win games. So again, come playoff time, I don't know who the right decision to go with is. I think it's going to come down to these last 12 games. But if you had the choice right now, who do you take in nets?
I go with Dobish, and I say that just purely based off the fact that I think it's really important. We've always said it. We've said a team that's successful in the playoffs doesn't necessarily have the best goalie on the ice, but they have a hot goalie. And I feel like we've said that so many times, but I think it's just proving to be true more and more. And especially now that goalies are they're not expected to, if you consistently have a 920 save percentage over the course of the year, you're unanimously winning the Vezina. So I just think that seeing how Dobush has played the last few games, despite that, because put it this way, Liam, if you look back to the Detroit game, if the Canadiens win that game by, let's flip the script, they win that game by a score of 3-1. You think there's any chance that Fowler plays tonight? Like, I don't.
Probably not. Probably not, honestly. Coming off, he won both those games before, right? He lost to the Ducks, but then beat the Bruins. So again, you're coming off a 2-game win streak. Yeah, I'd probably go with Dobesh again, especially with the significance of this game in terms of the wild card position. The Islanders are right there, so this is a must win. At the end of the day, it's a must win.
DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, is built for the fastest game on ice. With player props and live betting, every shift, every shot, every save gives you options to get in on the game with DraftKings Sportsbook. New customers bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN, that's code THPN, to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms.
Now let's shift to something that we can't debate because it's so concrete and it's just objective. Cole Caufield is the first Montreal Canadiens 40 goal scorer since I believe the 93-94 season for the Canadiens. That is most definitely something to be excited about. That is definitely something that Canadiens fans have not been able to witness in a really, really long time. And that's also something that Carey Price never got to see. But Dobesh gets in his first season as a Montreal Canadiens goalie. So I think or a full season as a Montreal Canadiens goalie. I find that pretty funny. But nonetheless, Cole Caufield has paid dividends on selecting him in the middle of the first round. And 40 goals with, again, like you mentioned, with about 15 games left or 13 games left, there's still damage to be done. Now, I don't think he gets to 50, but I think he comes close, and he's a very streaky goal scorer. But I think that there's something else to be said about this 40 goals, Liam, is that if you look on the screen right now, if you're watching, 40 goals, 29 assists, 69 points. He's over point per game with a plus 19. So if there was any doubts that Cole Caufield is not some sort of complete player and that he's just a complimentary player, and maybe that's a thought that I had at one point in time where I didn't know if Cole Caufield was complete enough to be a bona fide first-line guy on a Stanley Cup winning team, I honestly take that back, and I think that anyone watching or listening should too.
First thing, he's on pace for 49. So if he's that streaky goal scorer and is able to pot a few, we go to a few more overtimes, I think he hits 50 okay, pretty easily. But over here, you can see 5 overtime game-winning goals, 9 game-winning goals in itself. This is the breakout year for Caufield. I know he put up. We had gone over it. He had a very good pace, or he was following the same pace that year where he had like 26 before he got injured. But I'm glad the meme is over that people were saying Caufield's like the greatest 40 goal scorer to never score 40 goals. So it's very satisfying to see that happen.
And on top of that, funny enough, And he's so, like you mentioned, 9 game-winning goals. That's tied for the most in the league with Steven Stamkos. But also interesting to note, no empty net goals for Cole Caufield.
Crazy. In his
Think about
career,
that for
not
a
just
second.
this year. In his
Think about that for a
career.
second. Like, if we actually take, again, like, back in the day, you see Max Pacioretty score 35, 10 empty net goals. Nonetheless, goals are goals. It doesn't really, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter how you score them, but obviously, if we're talking about the difference between 10 and 0, when you're putting up 40, that's really, really impressive. And honestly, he's just become to me that very, very clutch player that I was potentially concerned about after his first shoulder injury. I was a little bit concerned that getting back up to speed after being on such a significant pace with, I think it was 26 goals in just over 40 games, and then missing the remainder of the season. I feel like that player that was producing at that elite level is the player that we see here, and that hasn't changed in the last few years, and it's really exciting and refreshing to see. So super happy that this guy's on our squad. Super happy that anytime we go to overtime, there's a glimpse of confidence or just pure. You just know what this guy's going to do with the game on the line, and I feel like that speaks volume not only in the regular season in the playoffs, but potentially in playoff in a playoff atmosphere where goals don't come very easy.
Yeah, and just to throw it out there, Ovechkin has 70 empty net career goals. So, what's Caufield's empty net sum going to be by the end of his career if he's
right now he's on pace for 0.
On pace for 0. There we go. That's what I was about to say.
It's kind of crazy.
It's nuts. It's nuts. But let's go back. Let's take a look at the point leaders for the Canadiens. We haven't done an update in a while. Suzuki obviously leading the way, on pace for about 96 points. So that would be a career high for him. Cole Caufield, like we just said, on a career high pace as well. Lane Hutson, over point per game. This guy is, he's proving that he's the best player on the Canadiens. Like, it's crazy because he's in his second season, but every time this guy is on the ice, like, he's just such a big difference maker, and it seems like he never has a bad game. Maybe he has a couple bad shifts, but overall, the effect he brings to the team is always net positive. It's never negative.
Yeah, I'm in awe at his game. We saw his brother get his first shot with Washington the other night, and I saw someone tweet, I thought it was hilarious, say, Habs fans, I'm a Caps fan, and this is the first time that I get to watch Cole Hutson. And is this what Habs fans get to watch every single night? Because it's pretty exciting. And I was like, yes. Plus, I think that Lane Hutson is realistically, I mean, obviously at this point, a better player than Cole Hutson, but the point is that he's electric and he's fun to watch and it's enjoyable to watch. And that power play is really, really fun to watch. I think if you go a little bit lower down on this list, I'm very, very impressed. Eye test, but even points production. 45 points in 68 games for Noah Dobson as a PP2 defenseman. But you know how you were talking about the fact that when Fowler's in nets, you feel this type of confidence or this comfort? I feel that exact way when Noah Dobson's on the ice. Look, he's not necessarily the most physical guy. He's not going to lay a guy out. But I feel like his positioning, his big stride, his ability to do these one-man breakouts while also finding the stretch pass, I just find it really enjoyable to watch. It's not the most flashy thing, but again, I really wonder where this team would be if they never made that trade for Noah Dobson, because I think that he goes unnoticed a lot of the time. But I think that trade and that extension was very, very valuable and a big factor as to why the Canadiens sit where they do right now.
And considering he's not on power play 1, he actually is 4th in even strength points on the Canadiens. So he is that difference maker come 5-on-5 time. We knew the point production was probably going to take a dip compared to his previous seasons in New York. But I mean, being on a 50-plus point pace in his first season in a new system, on a new team, not playing on a power play 1 role, I mean, I'd say that's pretty impressive. And I think the ceiling is even higher. I don't think he's reached that point yet, but massive difference maker. A guy that I think could have been considered for Team Canada and made a massive difference for that team. So a lot of positives to see from the Canadiens and their young roster. Taking a look at Slavkovsky, he hits his career high and is continuing to reach that, if he can hit potentially a 70-point season, I think that would be massive for him. And then Demidov as well. The eye test again, passes with flying colors every time he's on the ice. Difference maker as well. Right now, getting stuck with not terrible line mates, but guys who are not producing at the rate of Suzuki and Caufield. And again, another topic, but I'd love to see one day Demidov on a line with Susan Caufield just to see what he can do.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that it's obvious that that second line is not the one that the Canadiens expect to move forward with in the future. I also think that you got it, and that's why I put so much emphasis on the Robert Thomas thing, where I think that there's trust in Kapanen, but I think the trust lies more in being a bona fide third line center on a Stanley Cup winning team versus being a second line center who's expected to produce. Because we know Habs fans better than anyone, and I'm waiting for the day that we get to the playoffs. We go, I don't know, depends on who we play, obviously, or who the Canadiens play, but you go 6 games, let's say, and Kapanen has 1 assist, and Habs fans are in the comments or on Twitter freaking out at the fact that he didn't have a bigger impact. But the truth of the matter is that no one expected 20 goals from Oliver Kapanen in his rookie season. And the fact that he did produce that goes to show what he can be. But I always like to compare him, and I know he's a winger, but I always like to compare him to Arturi Lehkonen in the sense that it was a guy that was drafted more to be a role play on this team, produced some sort of offense to a certain extent, but will always be a guy that's very versatile and you can move up and down the lineup when there are injuries, but you shouldn't be expecting on him for second line production. And I think that that's where the Canadiens will hit a roadblock when it comes time for playoffs.
Let's take a quick look at Kapanen's game log. Obviously, donuts around the board. It's a Dunkin' Donuts 12-piece combo here. But let's say come playoff time, this is what his production is in the last 12 games. Maybe not 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, but a 1 here and there. If Michael Hage comes in, let's say Michigan gets eliminated, are you slotting Michael Hage on that second line?
I'm so reluctant to do so, but I don't think it's for the right reasons. Because
where would you slot him in the lineup?
Well, I think that it's difficult to actually determine a spot for him in this lineup because realistically, and we'll get into this a little like in a couple minutes, but the bottom 6 is very much competitive, internal competition, but also very much set in stone, I would say. So to play a guy that has top points in the NCAA at his age and to expect him to play anywhere but the top 6, I think would be an unrealistic expectation. My reservations lie with putting that much emphasis or putting that much responsibility into the hands of a guy who's just finishing in the NCAA and expect him to be a second line center for a playoff team. Now, it'll be clearly an exponential curve to the NHL for him if that is the case, but I'm hesitant just because it's going to be tough for him to get acclimated, but I don't see any other spot to put him other than in that 2C spot.
Yeah, and the one example I want to bring up is last season, Washington brought in Ryan Leonard, obviously a much higher drafted player, but I think Michael Hage can be a middle 6 guy right away when he comes into the lineup. Maybe that's not taking on any penalty kill responsibilities and maybe not getting as much ice time as some of the other guys, whether that's shifting around a guy who's on the 4th line onto the 2nd throughout the game. But I think you got to give a guy like Hage the shot if there's not a player who can step up and be on that second line. With Kirby Dach out now for the next foreseeable future, there's a gaping hole that needs to be filled. And I think Hage can be that guy and bring more offense to a lineup that already produces a lot. And especially replacing a guy who's putting up nothing right now.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I really like Newhook's game ever since being back from injury. I think he's playing with that same intensity. And I really do think that he's a player I think he's amongst some of the top guys that have really acclimated to Martin St. Louis' system better than anyone. I think he just understands how to play that neutral zone. And I think that he's becoming a little bit more creative in his play style and not just a straight line speed type of player, which is really nice to see. And I think he could be a really good winger, a very solid a very solid third line winger on a contending team. And of course, Demidov with his playmaking can obviously complement Hage's goal scoring abilities. So I don't think it's a bad shout. I get a little bit concerned that I don't know if there's anything that you want to add to that, but I get a little bit concerned that you look at this bottom six and you say that there's probably 8 guys in that bottom six that can play in some sort of role. And now adding Hage just means that you're going to bump down, let's just say for the sake of the explanation, Kapanen. Now, what do? How do you find that right line combination? Is it a bad problem to have? Or sorry, is it a bad problem to have? No, not really. But, signing Texier to an extension was definitely premature looking at the situation the Canadiens sit in right now.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple locks for that bottom six for sure come playoff time. But again, with Kirby Dach's injury, there are going to be some question marks. I just wanted to add in, looking at Alex Newhook's season this year, 6th in points per game. Even though he's played only 28 games, this would be a career high point pace for him. So obviously adjusting to this system very well. And when he's on the ice too, I think there's a lot of trust that the Canadiens put into him. So I've liked how he played, and I think it would be interesting. I think it'd be a very fast line, a very snappy line if Michael Hage was added to that duo of Newhook and Demidov right now.
So let's say you add Hage to the mix. And we're operating under the assumption that he slots into that 2C spot alongside Newhook and Demidov, or between, Newhook and Demidov. I also think, by the way, and I think this goes without saying, but that Newhook's game or adaptation to the NHL has become a lot better ever since he's been moved to the wing. I just see him there more. I don't know if you agree with that.
No, but for sure. I think he fills that role better.
I agree. But with that being said, and now you posted it up on the screen, but for those of you that are listening, the top 6 stays the same. The bottom 6, now with Kirby Dach's injury, you're looking at Jake Evans between Texier on the right, Bolduc on the left, and Danault centering Gallagher and Veleno. Just to note, Josh Anderson is day-to-day. I don't know if he's slotting in tonight. I'm not 100% sure, but it doesn't look like it. Dach is out. Laine is not making an appearance. That goes without saying. Are there changes that you potentially make to this bottom 6, or what do you do? Who are your locks? Who are not your locks? And what are you doing here?
My locks for playoff time: Evans, Danault, Anderson, Gallagher. I think the other 3 there, Veleno, Bolduc, Texier, it's going to be all up in the air what happens in these next 13 games. And then obviously whatever happens with Kirby, I think you got to bring him back into the lineup just for what he can potentially bring. But yeah, really only Evans, Danault, Anderson, Gallagher. I think those are playoff guys who know how to play playoff hockey. Obviously Evans and Danault, Gallagher and Anderson, all part of that Stanley Cup final team. They have the experience. They have the poise. So give me those 4. But with Bolduc's inconsistencies, not a massive fan of Veleno's game, but does bring a defensive aspect and that aggressive style. I've liked Texier's game, but like I said, it's going to come down to the last stretch here to see who cracks that playoff lineup.
I really have liked Texier's game over the last couple of games, and I find that line is doing a really good job. Granted, it is a lot on the outside, more that they're doing a lot of their work. But I find that they're cycling the puck really, really well. I find that there's a little bit of chemistry there, which is nice to see. I think that, to your point, even amongst those locks that you mentioned and the ones that you left out, I would say that it's probably a lock that Kirby Dach probably, at least in my opinion, should not draw back into the lineup even if he's healthy. Now, it's not, maybe it is a bit of a knock on him, but also it speaks to, I guess it just speaks to the fact that I think Texier slots a lot better into his type of role, especially if Dach's going to be on the wing. And I think that Bolduc brings, like you mentioned, at least some sort, and Veleno plays a defensive style, but Bolduc brings that physicality. And I think that he'll probably up his game a little bit more in the playoffs. I can see him being that type of player. So I wouldn't even bring Kirby back.
The problem is I just feel like they have this belief in Kirby that he's going to be this superstar guy, but that's obviously not the case anymore. And we're going to get into some contract talk for a little bit, but it just seems like they never stop believing in him. He has the longest leash ever.
Yeah, I know. But the truth of the matter is that, I mean, if you do want to pull it up on the screen when you have a second, I can kind of transition I can transition us into this topic. But more specifically, if you look at Kirby Dach, he is signed to a $3.3625 million deal that expires this year. Then he becomes an RFA. The Canadiens still retain his rights for one more season. Do you sign him to a 1-year deal? Because to me, what I see happening is they realistically trade his rights. Like, it wouldn't be surprising to me if a team like San Jose goes out and takes a shot on him. This is one of the last seasons that San Jose, because they didn't expect to be in a potential playoff spot, but I think that this is one of the last seasons that the San Jose Sharks will just be focused on hitting the cap floor and not pushing for something a little bit bigger. Now, it's not to say that they're going to go sign Kirby Dach to a massive extension, but it wouldn't be surprised if another team tried to take him on as some sort of project.
I think any team that is in need of a center is going to try and take a shot on him. I assume the Canadiens won't want to move him to an Atlantic team, but I mean, I'm looking at a team like the Bruins, who are very weak down the middle. Like, what's the harm in taking a shot on him? So any team in that situation. But my one fear is that Kirby's going to thrive on another team, and I guess you can't prevent that. It happens all the time. But at this point, I think you let him go. I know he's not a UFA, but you have to just move him for whatever you can.
No, I think that's the right approach. And you know what? Looking at this now, I will admit that I did say before that when the Canadiens went out and signed Texier to that extension, it was a bit premature. Sure, we can both agree on that. But if we can assume that Kirby Dach will not be back next season, let's just operate under that assumption. You open up a spot, right? You open up a spot. Now, if Michael Hage joins the team, then now you're pushing guys down. But from a winger perspective, a lot stays intact. And I do think that Texier could be some sort of in and out of the lineup guy who slots in on the third every so often. Or if there's an injury to the first line, he's skilled enough to play up for a game. I mean, it's not really bad to have in your back, or it's not bad to have him in your back pocket just in case. And especially with the cap going up, I don't think that amount that they signed him for is honestly too bad.
No, I don't think I ever had an issue with the contract total. I think it's more just about, he had 6 points in 2 games, and they're like, okay, this guy needs to be on the Canadiens. But he is like that Swiss Army knife where he can slot in on that first line, plays well with Caufield and Suzuki, and also has the versatility to play on the wing or at center if he needs to. So I was never upset with the contract sum, but I think it was just a little premature, especially with the amount of forwards the Canadiens have on the team. But clearly now it's working out because of all the injuries.
And what do you do exactly with when we're looking at this sheet? If you're listening, we're looking at the contracts that the Canadiens have over the next few years and their amounts. But there's 2 things that stand out to me and have stood out to most Montreal Canadiens fans over the last few years. Brendan Gallagher getting paid $6.5 million, not only for this season, but again for the next, as well as Josh Anderson for $5.5 million for this season and the next. That's $12 million that is being paid to those 2 players who, granted, Josh Anderson definitely stepped up his game against Washington last season, and he showed his worth as being a guy who performs in the playoffs. Gallagher put up 20 goals last season. Obviously, we've seen a massive regression from him, but to be expected. But my question to you is that looking at these contracts, it's a lot of money that's on the books that obviously they can go out and spend elsewhere.
Yeah.
What do you do? Because is next year, or is this, I feel like it's more next year. Is next year where that window actually starts to open for the Habs as a potential contender and not just in the mix?
I mean, even just to add on to that cap that's being relieved, Patrick Laine, that's 8.7. Gallagher, 6.5. Danault, 5.5. Anderson, 5.5. You're going to need to sign Demidov to basically whatever he wants. Do I think that's over 10? That's a conversation for another time, but I don't think so. And you're going to have to sign Alex Newhook. But let's say you have even $12 million to work with all those contracts coming off the books. That leaves room to go out and get a guy. I mean, this is going to be a take and a half here. But Jason Robertson, why don't you target a team that's struggling to be under the cap? Go out and poach that guy. Go out and be aggressive. And I think that's what Ken Hughes has been lacking right now. I understand that he's sticking to this this process, trust the process kind of vibe, but you got to be aggressive at a certain point. If the Canadiens don't make the playoffs this season, I would expect him to start preparing to make a big, big move. And I like not Nick Robertson, Jason Robertson a lot.
I mean, I think that's a player that any team would love to add to their squad, and obviously, I think that makes the Canadiens instant contenders, to say the least. I think it's also interesting to note that, again, I don't know what you think, but I don't think that you can necessarily have both Brandon Gallagher and Josh Anderson on the books going into next season, right?
Probably
if you're
not.
looking at this season, the Canadiens had both Demidov and Lane Hudson both on ELCs. So you're paying them just under $1 million this season. That is going to change very soon for Demidov. It's changing as of next year for Hudson.
Yep.
So these, I'll be blunt. What this is turning into, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but what this is turning into is a bit of a Dallas Stars situation, because what the Dallas Stars had and what they currently have is, yeah, their situation is a bit different because of the Mikko Rantanen trade and sign and trade, excuse me, or whatever, flip. But
Yeah,
not the
same
point.
thing.
The point is that guys like Wyatt Johnston, guys like Jason Robertson, Hintz, Heiskanen, Harley, Ottinger, they're trying to get all these guys under contract, and obviously for team-friendly deals, pushing the narrative that they are a contender. And that is very true. At this point in time, they are most definitely a contender. But at one point, that window is going to close. And if they don't come through with a Stanley Cup, then you could say that experience was, quote unquote, a bit of a failure.
Yeah.
And I think that the Canadiens are kind of setting themselves up to have that sustained success that Dallas has, which I think is really, really important and a really nice model to follow. But at one point in time, these contracts that we say are going to end in a year or two have to come off the book sooner rather than later, before it gets too late and before that window closes, even though I know it's just opening right now.
I think a lot of teams will be interested in Josh Anderson, so I assume he'll be gone in free agency. But a guy like Brendan Gallagher, I think they can bring him back on like a $1 million vet minimum, Jamie Benn type deal, where Demidov and Lane Hudson are kind of taking over the bulk of his contracts and more, obviously. But Gallagher's taking that step back, knowing he's a fourth line guy, has made his money, and now is going to take that $1 million deal to stay on the team. And I think we're going to see a lot of that with the Canadiens moving forward. Now that they have their core pieces and their big contracts in place, you got to go out and find those guys like a Corey Perry. Like, even I like to look at this like Matt Duchene, who was so happy in Dallas that he was even happier to take a reduced contract for the production he puts up. Like, that's a diamond in the rough right there, a needle in a haystack. You're not going to find that everywhere. But I think the contracts are going to kind of flip flop around, and but a guy like Anderson, like you said, it's going to be hard to keep him because of, I think, the interest he'll garner around the NHL.
It'll definitely be interesting to kind of follow that going into the offseason, especially depending on how successful or unsuccessful the Canadiens are in the playoffs, and even if they make the playoffs, which I think starts with tonight, because honestly, against another team in the Eastern Conference, who obviously kind of has their spot locked up in the Metro, but doesn't change the fact that another game against another Eastern Conference team becomes that much more important. The Canadiens, like I just mentioned, play against the Islanders tonight in a massive game. Liam, I don't even know. I don't even want to make predictions. I don't necessarily even want to speculate on the upcoming games, but New York tonight, Carolina on Tuesday. So you get a couple days to rest there. Back to it against Columbus in Montreal on Thursday. So that's 3 Metro Division teams.
I mean, the first thing I want to point out here, if you're watching us on YouTube, we're playing Saturday, Sunday this weekend, next weekend. We're playing Saturday, Sunday the following weekend. We're playing Saturday, Sunday the weekend after that. This is a lot of hockey in the next 3.5 weeks. So this is the most important stretch of the season. We're playing 8 playoff teams in the next 14 games, and it's not any West playoff teams. It's all East playoff teams. So every game matters. The Canadiens are gonna have to get over a big hump here. They're gonna have to figure it out. especially with their goalie situation. I mean, we've gone over everything, but these are important games. It's a lot of hockey. We saw that they were a little bit gassed come the end of that Western game streak. They dropped to San Jose twice. They dropped to Anaheim twice. So it's going to be tough for the Canadiens. And again, I don't want to speculate what their record is coming out of this. All I got to say is they got to lock in. They got to lock in hard.
So we'll leave it at that for today, Liam. It's been a fun episode 113. As per usual, make sure to check out the socials. If you're on YouTube, you see them down below. But just for those who are listening, at Habs Culture on Instagram, at Habs_culture on X/Twitter, and at Habs Culture on TikTok. Try and stay a little bit more consistent with the content going forward. Definitely shaping up to be a nice, fun end of season for the Canadiens, but also for the rest of the NHL. So stay tuned with that type of content, whether it's draft content or even free agency content come the summer. So make sure to check in there. And Liam, anything else?
It's March Madness in every sport. So let's hope the Canadiens can lock in here.
And let's also appreciate it before baseball becomes the only sport on TV, which I do enjoy, by the way. But when it's the only sport, it gets a little boring. So let's enjoy. But thank you guys so much for listening if you've made it this far. And we'll make sure to catch you guys next time.